All right. Well, welcome to the Park City Market Talk webinar, where you get the latest update about what's been happening in the Park City real estate market. I'm Ron Wilstein, the broker at Remax Associates here in Park City.
And I'm Jeremy Wilstein, buyer consultant for the Wilstein team, and we're here to share with you what's been happening in the world of Park City real estate. We're broadcasting from our new offices located here in Prospector Square in Park City, Utah, and we bring these presentations to you live each month to keep you informed on any changes that are happening here in the Park City market.
We're also here to answer any questions that you may have. So if we don't happen to cover the topic that you're interested in, or if you have some questions after watching this evening's webinar presentation, please contact us and we would be happy to assist you any way that we can. Well, the weather's been good here. We've been fighting with a lot of fires here in Park City and overall Utah. The fires haven't been in Park City, but certainly the smoke is fine on the way up here. But the warm weather leads the way to some nice summer activities that we want to remind you about before we get into our presentation. Deer Valley's hosting the Deer Valley Mountain Festival. Who's going to be there, Jeremy?
Our acts will include the music of Michael Jackson, the Utah Opera Group, Kansas with the Utah Symphony, and Earth, Wind, and Fire with the Utah Symphony, just to name a few.
Yeah, that's going to be pretty good. I think the first one, the Michael Jackson music's this coming Saturday. The 45th Park City Kimball Arts Festival is also
43rd.
43rd. Looking ahead. Always looking into the future. The 43rd Park City Arts Festival will be taking place on Friday, August 3rd through Sunday, August 5th. So you want to come out for that.
And then, of course, mountain biking, boating, golfing, they're always available throughout the summer.
That's right. Well, let's get into our topics for this evening on our real estate update. Let's begin by looking at what we're going to cover. And we're going to begin by talking about what's been happening in the Park City market since the very beginning of the year, since we are now officially halfway through.
And then we're going to share with you about some recent changes in how foreclosures are being handled by the banks.
Next, we're going to discuss the increasing number of multiple offers and full price offers that we're seeing these days on Park City properties. Very exciting.
And finally, we're going to discuss how sellers can sell their properties relatively quickly while coming off their list price by 5% or less.
That's right. Before we get into these topics, we want to remind you that you can always go back and watch past Park City Market Talk webinars. Simply go to ronwilstein.com/webinars and select your choices. They're available to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so feel free to check those out as you see fit. So without further delay, let's get into our topics. And let's take a look at what's been happening over the past 6 months.
So the information that we're going to share with you covers closed sales during the first 2 quarters of this year, from January 1st, 2012 through June 30th, 2012. And then we're going to compare the sales activity to the same time period the year before. The total number of homes, condominiums, and vacant land sold during the past 6 months is down 2%, or a modest 10 sales, from the total number of sales during the same time period the year before.
That's right. Now, when we look at the chart before you here, we have a breakdown of homes, condominiums, and vacant land. 247 homes have sold during the past 6 months compared to 230 sales the year before. So that's actually 17 more home sales, an increase of about 7%. When we go to the center of the chart, you look at condominiums, and they're actually down by about 10 sales. We had 249 sales during the first 2 quarters this year compared to 259 the year before, so down 10 sales or 4%. Lot sales are also down by 17 sales, and this drop went from 97 for the first half of 2011 to 80 for the first 6 months of this year. So that's about an 18% decline. So homes are up, condos overall, and lots are down in terms of number of sales. Now let's take a look at each category a little more closely.
The number of home sales within the Park City city limits for the first 2 quarters is up 15% from the year before. There were 90 sales during the first 6 months of the year compared to 78 sales the year before. And then also sales in the Snyderville Basin Sales are actually up in the Snyderville Basin with 157 sales during the first 2 quarters of this year compared to 152 the year before. So that's an increase in 5 sales or 3%.
And when we turn to condominium sales, as you can see in the Park City limits, actually fell by about 7%, with 149 closed sales during the first 2 quarters of this year compared to 161 for that same period the year before. The Snyderville Basin, however, rose by 2 sales. It's not a lot, but it equates to 2% from 98 sales to 100 sales for this year.
Vacant land sales were mixed, with them rising significantly within the Park City limits and falling in the Snyderville Basin. Within the Park City limits, the number of lot sales rose by 12 sales, with 23 sales for the first half of this year compared to 11 sales in 2011. So that's an impressive 109% increase.
It's a big deal. The same, unfortunately, cannot be said about lot sales in the Snyderville Basin. They dropped off 34%, and a lot of that has to do with the promontory lot sales that brought the market back. The very best buys are gone. There's still some good bargains out there, but the prices have firmed up, and as a result, the sales have actually slowed down from 86 the year before to 57 this past 6-month period. So that's a bit of a snapshot as to what's happening in Park City real estate market for the first half of 2012. Now, there has been some recent changes nationwide on the foreclosure procedures, which is ultimately going to slow down the process that the banks have at their disposal to foreclose on properties whose borrowers have stopped paying their mortgage on their property. And we want to take a little bit of time in this evening's webinar just to talk about that, because that may have an impact upon your selling or investing or buying options. We want to share with you the most recent details on this, but first we'd like to take a moment to define a couple terms that are often thrown around. You might hear them, perhaps not understand them fully. They do have an impact upon the pending slowdown of foreclosures.
So the foreclosure process in the United States is regulated by state law, and the process followed by the foreclosing bank, lender, or servicer of the loan is either a judicial, meaning it takes place through the court system, or a judge, or non-judicial, when a judge does not need to hear the case and then render a decision. Both processes result in the sale of a property at an auction. Some may include what is known as a redemption period after the sale, which allows the borrower to reclaim his or her property by fully repaying the loan, or at least bringing it current, and then paying any fees or penalties that may be due. In most states, the foreclosing party can also pursue the borrower for the unpaid balance and the loan remaining after the sale.
That's right. Fraudulent foreclosure practices, commonly referred to as robo-signing, which were uncovered a couple years ago, opened a new wound in that whole foreclosure crisis. Now, when these fraudulent foreclosure practices were first discovered, the foreclosure process basically came to a screeching halt. The pipeline of delinquent loans swelled up to historic levels, and lawsuits abounded, and lengthy settlement negotiations on all levels of the government began. In recent months, however, the foreclosure mechanism has started to move forward again. Foreclosure starts, that is the first phase of the process, rose nearly 12% in May over April figures. Foreclosure sales, that's completion of that process, when the property goes back to the bank or to a bidder at the courtroom steps, rose by 10% in May. So a significant increase as they have now kind of gotten things in motion again.
And this increase, while still way off the volumes that we saw in 2010 prior to robo-signing, is largely due to the $25 billion settlement earlier this year between the Department of Justice, 49 state attorney generals, and the 5 largest national banks.
The most significant impact of the settlement has been the clarification of foreclosure standards for servicers. This clarity has helped reduce some of the prior uncertainty as servers were waiting for this final settlement. It basically slowed down. Now that it's been well defined, it's starting to come out again. There is still, however, a huge disparity between foreclosure processing in states requiring a judge, judicial, and those that do not non-judicial areas. In California, for instance, a non-judicial state, it takes 274 days on average to foreclose on a property, 274 days, while it takes over 600 days to foreclose in judicial states such as New Jersey. The number of foreclosures in judicial states is 2.5 times the number of non-judicial states. So it really slows the process, and you have to have a judge reviewing it versus just it's in the system and it follows its course. The good news is California boasts about having one of the fastest foreclosure timelines in the nation, which is helpful given the fact that they have the highest volume of distressed properties in the nation as well. But this may be about to change, unfortunately.
Yeah, last week the California State Legislature passed 2 bills intended to protect homeowners. So they prohibit dual tracking, which is when a bank tries to modify a loan while at the same time going forward with a foreclosure.
We saw that, by the way, a lot the last couple of years, where we would be helping people sell their properties. Meanwhile, the bank would be evaluating a short sale, simultaneously foreclosing on the property. So it's nice to see that as part of this settlement. They got rid of that craziness.
And it also requires that mortgage servicers provide the borrower in documentation that the lender has the right to foreclosure. Fraudulent foreclosure affidavits would result in civil penalties. So many of these requirements are also part of other previous settlements with the banks and some large lender claims that are already doing them.
That's right. So the system, all in all, is improving in terms of how they handle this. So you're just totally overwhelmed by it. On another front, some local California officials are trying to invoke eminent domain powers to modify mortgages that are underwater when the borrower owes more on the home than it's currently worth. Now, eminent domain can be invoked when a property is deemed to be a blight on the community in which it exists, and the seizing of it would be good for the general public. As an example, if you had a very degraded property, it made the whole neighborhood look bad, often the governing authorities will seize the property, basically tear it down and replace it, and the overall community benefits. That's why eminent domain is sometimes used. So now they're talking about using eminent domain, which is stretching probably the legal system here, as another way to roadblock foreclosure process. Creativity abounds when it comes to this issue here. What all comes down to consumer protections versus speedy recovering of the housing market. Whether it's lenders trying to save borrowers from foreclosure through loan modifications and a principal reduction, or laws trying to protect borrowers from faulty foreclosure processing, or inventive ways to change what is owed on a mortgage, the plain fact is that many borrowers simply cannot afford the homes they are in. The majority of the 5.5 million properties whose mortgages are either delinquent or already in the foreclosure process will end up on the auction block. That we know. But there's a strong argument that the housing market needs to heal itself before it can grow again. So while we don't like to see foreclosures, we don't like the impact that those sales, bank sales, often bring down the market, we're really not going to get out of this mess until that inventory is absorbed by investors and sometimes first-time buyers. So while the process is painful, it may simply be something you have to go through. Clearly, American consumers were not well protected in the past during the historic housing boom or during the ensuing bust. Laws do need to be changed, banks do need to be held accountable, and their actions punished when fraudulent practices exist. So that's what's happening in the foreclosure arena. You'll be hearing more about it because the transition is underway right now, and we want to report on it.
We'll go to our next topic of the evening, increase in multiple offers and full price offers. So during the past year, and particularly the past 6 months, we've seen a steady increase in the number of multiple offers and full price offers presented in the course of buying Park City real estate.
For many years now, most real estate markets across the country have been buyer markets. In other words, the supply and the price of the properties favors the buyers, not the sellers. Property values have fallen, and sellers willing to accept lower prices for their properties have been selling. That has been occurring, But those unwilling to drop their price with the declining market have been unable to sell their properties. This market condition obviously favors the buyer and who always wants to purchase a property for less money. However, we are seeing a change in certain segments of the marketplace, and this is good news for Park City.
So these days, experienced realtors as well as more well-informed buyers can see new properties coming on the market and instantly know if they're good deals. Their knowledge of the market allows them to instantly recognize well-priced properties and underpriced properties that will sell within days, if not hours, and when they come on the market. And they will sell at their full price, if not above their full list price. Frequently we're asked which properties are receiving full price offers or multiple offers, and expecting the answer to be some hot property or a popular neighborhood. But it isn't the case of it isn't a case of certain properties being more popular than others, or one neighborhood being in greater demand than the other.
What is attracting these high price offers or multiple offers seems to basically be two things these days. It either is the list price of the property or it's the limited inventory of a certain type of property within a certain price range. And frequently it's a combination of the two factors.
If a property is priced correctly or even a little bit below its fair market value, well-informed buyers and real estate agents who are familiar with market values instantly recognize a good deal when they see one. And agents who are on the ball are quickly contacting their clients and telling them about these exceptional deals, and their buyers are quickly writing offers and purchasing these homes and condominiums, sometimes and oftentimes without even seeing them first.
That's right. If you don't believe that's happening with the aid of the internet, a couple pictures that agents often will shoot, people are pulling the trigger and they're buying properties these days if the property is priced right and attractive. Now, those buyers who know current property values are coming in strong in terms of their offer price when they are writing these offers. It's not a case that they are willing to overpay for a property and that's why they're offering full price. Rather, they recognize that the list price is already a good value, so they are more concerned about buying it fast and first rather than risking losing it by putting in a lower offer that may be outbid by another buyer who appreciates the value. So it's a little bit of a race to the finish line at the very beginning of negotiations, very different than a buyer's market where you could take it very, very slow. We're definitely seeing a change in Park City. So they go in strong on price to make sure that they get the deal before someone else gets it.
Yeah, and even in those circumstances, buyers often find themselves in a multiple offer situation where more than one buyer wants the property. And in those instances, often the sellers will go back to each buyer and give them an opportunity to present their highest, best offer, and the property usually goes to the highest bidder.
So if it isn't price that's attracting multiple offers, it's the type of property within a specific price range that's attracting them. There are certain segments in the market that have little or no supply of properties in them. While buyers circle almost like hungry sharks waiting for the next property to come on the market, they're ready to pounce on a good deal. These properties may be homes or condominiums. For instance, there are very few homes within the 3 or more bedroom range that are priced under $400,000 in our marketplace in Park City. If one of those types of properties comes onto the market and it's in pretty good condition, they usually will sell pretty quickly.
The same can be said about our shortage of high-quality, non-dated, high-end homes in certain neighborhoods. There's a limited supply of these sorts of homes in the $1.5 million to $3 million range, and if a home in excellent condition comes on the market, it often very quickly attracts multiple buyers and multiple offers. The same is true of certain condominiums, particularly if there are very few units for sale within a condominium project. Again, they must be priced correctly to attract buyers and in good condition, but when it occurs, the interest is very impressive and the properties generally sell quite quickly.
The key to attracting lots of buyers and full price offers these days is to price your property so that it appears to be a good bargain in today's marketplace. The buyers out there today are prudent, they're well educated, they can recognize a good deal, when they see it, and they will act pretty quickly on that. Anything less will put you into the category of, frankly, the majority of listed properties in Park City and Deer Valley, where they are nice properties for the most part, but they are not perceived as good deals. Consequently, they take a while to sell, and frequently only after 1 or 2 price reductions. This naturally leads us into our final topic for this evening.
Well, since most sellers don't have multiple properties to sell, when they list their home or condominium, it's not necessary to have multiple offers to accomplish their selling goals. They only have one property to sell, so they really only need one acceptable buyer for the property.
That's right. Now, every seller has to decide at what price they're going to list their property for sale. No seller wants to underprice their property when they list it because they don't want to leave any money on the negotiating table when it comes to selling their property. And while this is totally understandable, overpricing your property would do 2 things that most sellers do not want to occur.
First, their properties just won't sell, thereby defeating their goal of selling their property. And second, if and when it does sell, it will likely occur after 1 or more price reductions to get in the right price range to sell.
Now, if a property has been on the market for a long time before being reduced to the correct price range, the market may have lost value during that same time frame. This makes it even more difficult for sellers to lower their price because now they have to drop it much further to get to the new market level.
The best thing a serious seller can do is to price their property at or even below its fair market value, but no more than 5% above its fair market value for it to sell.
It used to be true that the only highly motivated sellers who really have to sell their property for whatever reason should price their property either below or at, but no more than 5% above the fair market value. And everyone else can price their properties 10% or 15% or more above its true value, since they really don't need to sell their property. And that's been basically the normal practice, at least in Park City's real estate market. Property owners who choose to list their property too high do so hoping that someone uninformed about the market conditions is going to come along, fall in love with their property, and blindly pay more than what it is worth. Needs to understand that that just doesn't happen these days anymore. Too much knowledge is out there. It's so readily accessible through the internet and through real estate professionals that buyers just don't do that.
In today's market, only properly priced properties are selling. The others simply sit there without selling. They grow stale on the market and often never receive a single offer. They might as well not even be listed at all.
However, if a property is listed at the correct price, it will likely sell for 3 to 5% less than their asking price in a relatively short period of time. Now, as we shared earlier, there are some exceptions to this. When properties attract multiple offers or full price offers, those are the exceptions. But this is generally, as we've already shared, when there's either a shortage of inventory in a certain type of property or condominium project or in a price range, or simply an irresistibly priced property that buyers and investors come out of the woodwork to buy. By and large, the majority of the marketplace doesn't fall into that category. As a seller, you alone must decide how much you want to sell your property for and how quickly you want to sell it. You'll want to learn about the current market conditions so that you can make well-informed decisions about your property and then correctly price it. The days of pricing it way high and letting people come down and basically negotiate you down and down and down really is a thing of the past, because 1, there's plenty of properties to choose from. 2, everyone can see them on the internet without even showing up at the property address. And so the weeding out process happens much quicker without anyone being disturbed or inconvenienced going to the property or entertaining buyers. And so they eliminate that process. They're more selective, and the old school approach is just that. It's old school and it's not working in today's new school.
Well said.
Thank you.
Well, this brings us to the end of another Park City Market Talk webinar, and we're glad that everybody has chosen to spend this evening with us. As is our practice at the end of each webinar, we want to give you the opportunity to ask any questions you may have, so simply type them in the chat Q&A box, and we will do our best to answer them.
That's right. And while you're doing that, I want to remind you that you can rewatch this evening's webinar or any of our past webinars simply by going to ronwilstein.com/webinars. Have a host of webinars there on a variety of subjects, so check them out. And if you are considering selling your property either now or in the future, please request our 20-page magazine entitled Smart Seller. It will provide you with some valuable information to help you prepare your property for selling and to sell it faster and for more money when you ultimately do place it on the market.
To receive your copy of the Smart Seller magazine, simply type in your name and mailing address in the chat Q&A box, and we'll drop one in the mail. If you're not watching this live, you can, instead of typing in the chat Q&A box, you can send us an email at ron@thewilsteinteam.com, and we'll make sure to send you a copy right away.
That's right. So let's take a look at the questions, Jeremy.
All right, let's see. This one just came in. If foreclosures slow again, how will that affect the market recovery?
Good question. On the one hand, when foreclosures are off the market, it actually paves the way for privately owned properties to sell. However, if there is the promise or the knowledge that future foreclosures will come on the market, it tends to cause some buyers to hesitate at buying because they think, gee, if I buy now based upon current market values and a bunch of foreclosures come on, values will likely drop. I don't want to do it. So for some people, if they don't have to buy, it might cause them actually to postpone the buying decision. But time is going to tell when we see that. We frequently talk about in our webinars shadow inventory. That's these default properties that have not been foreclosed on yet, either because that settlement hadn't occurred that finally did take place earlier this year, or they just weren't sure what procedures. Now that these procedures are being worked out, I think we're going to see them come into the marketplace. It's just, we keep dealing with these unknown little twists that are, I think, politically driven, frankly, and they cause the slower process of the foreclosures. Less inventory, better for sellers, but the buyers have to get past the idea of maybe having values settle down a little bit again. I think this is, frankly, truer across the country than it is in Park City. We're in a much smaller marketplace. There aren't simply as many foreclosures and notices of default here as in many places. And so while we're not immune to it, we're not impacted by it as much as a lot of places. All right, we've got another question. How do you price your property if you have lots of competition in the neighborhood and nothing is selling? Well, there's a couple questions you want to take into account. Number one, you want to ask, why is nothing selling? It may be that everyone is at a price point which is higher than buyers are willing to buy. And so they're simply, it looks like they're ignoring your whole neighborhood, but that's really not happening. Just not happy with the price. That's conceivably the case. That's an easy one to figure out. We look at what has sold in the past and look at its prices and look at what people are trying to get. If there's too much space in between those two, that may account for it. But your question says nothing's selling, and if nothing is selling, then we kind of look outside your neighborhood or condominium property, whichever is applicable, see what else is selling. And if nothing is selling at all anywhere, then it may be a lag in the marketplace. But if things are selling elsewhere, then it may mean that your neighborhood or your condominium property still needs to fine-tune its adjustment on price. We often talk about absorption rate, and it's one of the best ways we can predict future sales. Absorption rate is nothing more than looking at the last 6 months or the last year or 2 years or whatever, looking at certain price points and seeing how many sales of similar type properties have occurred. If we're seeing one sale every week for a month, then on average in a certain property, and there's 4 properties listed, then there's a 1-month inventory. If there's 16 properties listed, then there's a 4-month inventory. And so looking at the absorption rate also will impact pricing of a property. If there's very few sales, sometimes we find ourselves telling sellers that, gee, in 6 months there's only been 2 sales in your condominium property. one every 3 months. So there's 3 properties to choose from, including yours. You want to make sure if you need to sell in the next 3 to 6 months that you're picked, and so you've got to price accordingly. So hope that kind of addresses that question. Anyway, I'd like to think that did. Well, I think that's our questions for this evening. And again, if you have any others that come to mind after the fact, by all means, feel free to call us either at 487-0151 if you're in Park City, or toll free 1-800-535-0151, or email us either ron@thewilsteinteam.com or jeremy@thewilsteinteam.com, and we will happily answer your questions and assist you in any way that we can.
Yeah, so our next Park City Market Talk webinar will be held Tuesday, August 14th at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. This will start our new schedule of presentations. This is the second week, or the second month. We moved our presentations to the second Tuesday as opposed to the last Tuesday of the month, so we can get better data. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us at 800-535-0151.
And if you want to take advantage of the Deer Valley Music Festivals or the Arts Festival, be sure to do so, because by the next webinar, most of those are going to be over with and past. So thanks for joining us this evening. Have a good time in Park City or wherever you are at.
Good night.
Good night.